Welcome to the Winners Find a Way show and podcast with your host, Trent M. Clark, three-time World Series coach, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur, having started 12 companies, coach to the 1%, and an international speaker. This show is going to be your go-to podcast for facing adversity, being inspired, and overcoming obstacles, all from the best in the world, business, sports, and leadership. Hate the crappy ingredients in many beverages and energy drinks? Rebellious Infusions are the go-to functional beverage. They have 5 or fewer plant-based organic ingredients, no sugar, no calories, loaded with antioxidants to boost your immune system, and L-theanine for brain health. Rebellious Infusions are available at drinkrebellious.com. Rethink your drink. For 10% off of your next purchase, use the code 99999.
Hi, this is Trent Clark, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur, international speaker, and longtime coach in professional baseball, coaching in 3 World Series. And welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am super excited about my guest today, Brad Chiet. Brad Chiet on the Winners Find a Way show. Super excited. You're going to love this LA super phenom, musical guru. Brad, bring us up. Take us into the show.
All right, man. Come on, man. You know,
I love it. That is Brad Chiet.
That was your theme, man.
Brad is the owner of Fuel Music and Sound, longtime entrepreneur, but it is a crazy background. And I want to get into that in just a minute. Before we go, Winners Find a Way show. If this is your first time joining us, have you ever faced stiff adversity, felt like the losses are mounting, and you need to find a better way? I think you've come to the right place. Whether you're already an entrepreneur, an athlete, a business leader looking to get better, or you're just starting your journey to being elite, this is the place. This is the show. This is the podcast you need to be on, because we talk about some tough stuff and some great things, and you will get some lessons along the way. So, Brad, before we introduce you, tell them where people can find you. Where are you online?
Probably the best way is just type in my name. It's interesting because I am the only person in the world with that name. So that's
really?
The last name is tough, but yeah, that's kind of the cool thing. So if you type in my name, you will find me, and you can go to fuelmusic.com.
Love it. Are you on social, LinkedIn, all that?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a good place. Do LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, not as much. It's just I only have so much time in the day, and I really try to connect directly with people. I try to reach out, call, text, but I do keep a presence, especially on LinkedIn. And I don't know if you know this, but it's important to have a good LinkedIn profile, because if you type in your name or look for yourself, that will be the second or third thing that pops up. So that will be something that comes up. So if you want people to find you, make sure you put a little time into the LinkedIn. That's an important one.
I'm thinking this like your set background should be your LinkedIn big profile, man. the British pillows, man. Like you got it really dialed in right there.
Yeah, man.
Like the studio's looking pretty sweet, right?
Well, cool.
Well,
so you can see this side, but the side you're not seeing is all the electronic stuff, because a lot of music today is done with electronics and synthesizers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then on that side of the room is more the acoustic side. So the room, the evolution of the spaces, it just divided up into half, like acoustic, which is where you really feel it, and then the other half production, where you do all the electric work and computer work.
Well, I like it because that's the stuff behind you. I know. I start seeing the soundboards and stuff. It just looks like hieroglyphics, right? Like I don't know what I don't know what it does. I don't know what it means. I just look at it and I'm overwhelmed already looking at soundboards all the time.
Well, that's inspiring. That's where you get your inspiration. And this side of the room, which you don't see, is where you got to do the work, and it's where we are today. But I think a lot of music and a lot of passion and inspiration comes from playing real instruments. So I try to incorporate that.
Well, I love that. I want to get into that a little bit, because I think that matters for a lot of people who always see the end product and go, "Oh, isn't this great?" You see the cover of the band and they're on the album, they got their gear and all, but like the work behind the scene that goes into the jingles for the commercials, the sound going into music and production, all those things. No one thinks about the labor of love, right?
Yeah,
they got to go in.
Sometimes it starts on just a little recorder, like a little handheld, or I used to have a little micro or my phone. If I just have an idea, I'll just hum it in. That's sometimes where it starts. You just play around on the piano, but it's passion, but it's also a lot of skill where you learn, just like what you do. It's like putting in the hours to get good enough at it. So when you have an idea or an inspiration, you can bring it to fruition and make it happen. So it's not just about having an idea one day and, oh, I want to do this. It's like, you got to put in the hours and the work. And this room
That's so true. Let's jump in. Brad Chiet, owner of Fuel Music and Sound, head of TV music over at GrooveWorks. And you're a latecomer a little bit to the entertainment industry, because what most people don't know about you, Brad, is that you used to be a pocket protector wearer. You were an aerospace engineer.
That's right. And you talk about the pocket protector, but when you're in that world, that's status. What you keep in that pocket protector, like if you have your gauge and your nice pen and your little ruler thing, it's like status, man. So, yeah.
Is that like the letters after your name, like, in the real world, like in your pocket, right?
That's cool. Well, you realize you need those, but you're wearing like a shirt and a tie when you're engineering back then. And you had those little plastic things, or else the pencils will leave marks. And it's important. And, that's your tool set, man. And I was an engineer. I worked, when I got out of college, I got an engineering degree, and I worked in aerospace and defense. I worked on the F-18s, the Harrier, like defense contracts, vertical launch missile systems. And I was out on the shop floor, but I used to have a clipboard, and I used to have, like, during work, I'd have a little clipboard, and I'd be like writing music notes and stuff, for like lyrics.
Really? So you knew, like, hey, you weren't sure you were in the right seat, even though I'm sure there's kids that at 10 years old would be like, that's exactly the seat I want to be like.
But I didn't know that seat existed. Yeah, I was doing engineering, which was cool, but I didn't even know that. I had no idea that, this is in the 80s. Like today, there's so much talk about, do your dream, do your passion, you can do music. But back then, that was not the case. Yeah. So I did music for fun and a hobby. And then I got my engineering degree. I got a job, and I had some money. So I went to the music store to buy some equipment, because now I'm making some money so I can have fun.
Yeah.
And there was a magazine there. And on the cover was this guy who did music for commercials and jingles. And I read it, and I was like, wait a second, you can do that for a living? Like I was like, oh my God, like that's a career. And then I started I had like my little equipment I bought, and back then you did everything on cassette. It was like really not like today, and I used to write songs. And then the local radio station, I mailed the cassette tape to the local radio station, and they started playing it. So they'd be playing The Cure, Depeche Mode, and then one of my songs. And it was like so exciting to hear yourself on the radio, especially back then, man. There was no internet, no spot, none of that. It was just like, it was like radio. It was cool.
Well, let me touch on that, because you've got this engineering and you've got this passion. Boston, right? Like, weren't they MIT grads? They were all like high level tech.
And Boston. That's what got me back into music. I was engineering in school. I kind of put the music down, and my brother, he's such a badass, for my birthday, he bought me the Rockman, which was the guy from Boston, Tommy Schultz. It was like small, but you plug your guitar into it and you put headphones on, and it sounds like you're in a studio. It has like reverb and delay and distortion, which at the time, unless you went to a studio, you couldn't get. So that kind of so it's his fault. He got me pumped up.
It's all your brother's fault. And Boston. Those two guys.
Those guys screaming. Yeah. But it was so exciting. And if the job I had was better, when you work for a government contractor or any big company, you're very limited in what you can do. And I'm very creative. And, one of my breakthroughs, and as you get older, you learn more about yourself. And I learned that I'm an entrepreneur, and music really important to me. And if I don't do that, I will not be happy. So it's like almost like a curse. It's like you have to do it, even if it's not maybe financially in your best interest, and you got to take a shot at it. You just have to do it sometimes, man. So if you don't have that have to passion, it's not the career I'd recommend, but for some people, we have to do it, man. It's just like there's no choice.
Well, I think it's so good. And by the way, financially, this has worked out okay, hasn't it? Like, you're doing okay here.
Fortunately, it has worked out, but I got to tell you, like the first year, like I quit my engineering job, and that was a tough decision to even do that, because obviously my parents were not super supportive of it. They you have an engineering degree,
college, right?
I think my dad was afraid I was going to move back in with him and his new wife. That was the fear for him. Stick with your job. So I was engineering, and I really wasn't digging it, and it was really tough for me to decide, what should I do? And there's a couple of things that made me think about it. And one was, I asked myself the question, I was trying to take the finances out of the equation. So I asked myself, what would I do? And I thought, if I won the lottery and money wasn't an issue, then I would quit my job and, get recording equipment and do music. And then I thought, well, why don't I just quit my job and do that? And even if I make no money, I'll be living like I won the lottery. That's what makes me happy and makes me feel whole and brings me joy. And I think a lot of people get caught in the money trap, and they're just working for the dollar, and then they end up having to buy things to try to feel happy. And I remember so many engineering students and friends of mine in college. They're college students. They get the job. First thing they do is they get a new car payments, apartment, and then all of a sudden they have this nut every month and you're stuck.
Yeah.
And I remember when I graduated, it's one thing I did not do. It's tempting to buy the new car like everybody. You got the job, you can afford the monthly payments. But I knew that then it would restrict my freedom. So I kind of learned how to delay gratification and know myself enough to what's going to make me happy and what's not, which I think is super important.
Very powerful. Plus, knowingly or unknowingly, right? You went to your passion. So you did spend some money on some equipment that ultimately could serve you, because when all of a sudden you do this cut and say, hey, I'm going to go out, you don't just stop, right? You go, hey, I'm going to upskill. I'm going to go in and enroll at UCLA's music school, right? And you're like, you already got an engineering degree and you're like, you already got a job, right? You go to work in the business, a little job, right? And something that you can do, make some money. And you enroll in school, still not having the big overhead, but yet investing back into Brad and really ultimate fuel music, right? That's what it'll become.
Yeah. So it's having the passion to invest in yourself, and really it's things you want to do because you're going to be, I think, an entrepreneur. And I think all entrepreneurs will agree with this. It's a lot of time and studying and trying to figure stuff out. And that passion is what keeps you in there when things are tough and things are not going well. There was a lot of years where it wasn't, I moved out here. I didn't know anybody. What I was doing when I moved out here, it was pretty funny. I put an ad in the New Yorker magazine, a little, like one of those little ads in the back of the magazine. It was before internet. Okay. No, none of that stuff. Yeah. I put a little ad in there and I did this thing I called gift wrap. And I wrote this rap song, and then I put the ad in the New Yorker, and people used to send me like pages of information about like someone's birthday, and I'd write the lyrics and I'd make the tape and I'd send it to them. It was like a roast. It was like making fun of who they dated and where they came up from. But I had it was expensive. So I had some pretty famous people sending me pages of really personal information, which I don't think would happen today, but it was funny. But so I was doing that, trying to make money. I remember my sister asking me, well, how long are you going to do this for before you go back to engineering? And I'm like, and at first I was like, well, I'm going to give it a year. Right. And then in a year, it wasn't, what going to happen in a year. Then, 2 years and it's still not quite rocking. Then I'm saying, well, I'm going to give it 3 years. And then I was approaching 3 years and I realized this is just what I have to do. I'm just going to keep doing this. And I think it's when you reach that point where, it's like when you set a timeline or a way out, you ask yourself, well, how can I get out of this? What else can I do? But when you make the commitment, you're like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. Then you just ask yourself, how can I make this successful? Yeah. And it's the questions you ask yourself are so important. Like you got to ask yourself empowering questions and the right questions. And I think when you're like truly committed, and even quitting my job and moving out for a year to try it is not truly committed. That's trying it for a year. But when I was like, I'm just going to keep doing this because I wouldn't enjoy anything else. And it would be, for me personally, soul wrenching to go back to work for like a big company, unless it was music or something, unless it's my thing. So that's, I think, when the turnaround where it was just like, you really start being creative and clever and thinking about how you can make it work.
That's awesome. I mean, you finished music school at 36 years old, but you have all this musical experience now. And now you have a degree. Serve you? Did it get you where you wanted? I mean, it gave you credibility, right?
Well, the engineering was great because I wasn't sure what I wanted. I didn't know myself well enough, but I think it's about solving problems. And what I found is, it's interesting. I know several entrepreneurs and we know a few people, they have like plumbing businesses or motor boat business, but they're not plumbers or sea enthusiasts. They have like these degrees in like economics or different things. So I think you learn a lot of skills in school. You learn how to finish things, how to come up against a lot of obstacles. And for me, solving problems and working through stuff. And at the time, there really wasn't TV, film, music school. There wasn't like orchestration for film school. Didn't exist. I mean, you could take, there were some music schools like where you could learn concert piano, but
Juilliard.
So I just learned it on my own. I just bought the equipment, read books where I could get them. And then after I moved out here, I didn't really quite have that skill set. So UCLA was offering classes and they actually had teachers who did it for real. So that was amazing. But that was before they were just starting these programs up. But it's really about doing it yourself. Like a lot of kids will go to Berkeley or these film and TV programs, and they'll send me a tape like, hey, if you're looking, but they don't even have the equipment. Like some of these guys, it's like they take the class, they read the book, they might do a couple of assignments, and the stuff is just, it's terrible, man. It's like they don't have the passion or the hours. It's like, and what I love about like in engineering, like you get your resume and your degree is important, but in music and creative, no one cares at all about where you went to school or what you did. They just want to hear that tape or see that video. It's like, is this stuff rocking or not? Is this great or not? So that's really what it comes down to, which I think is cool. It's about performance. It's like if you're an athlete and you're great, no one cares where you went to.
Yeah, I think we see that. We see that now every Sunday, right? Like you come in the NFL and you got like Troy State. Well, how come that guy, if he was so good, why didn't Alabama or Florida or Michigan sign that? Like, it doesn't matter where you came from. If you can play, you can play.
Yeah.
And they
it's
prove
about the passion, because some people have the passion and it's just like what they have to do, and they put the hours in. You got to put the hours in, man.
All right. So tell us a little bit about, did you have one of those most like impactful moments where you were like, man, I'm a kid, and somewhere between like those years where you just knew like, hey, I am destined to be in the music industry. Like I am going to be LA. I'm going to do this and go plant my flag. And they're going to go Brad Chiet.
When I was a kid, basically the career choices were engineer, lawyer, or doctor. I mean, that was like, that was ingrained in my head. So it took a while for me to really realize that music could even be a career. And like when I saw that magazine, it was really like, holy, like this can be a career. And then there was difficult thinking. Is that possible? Can I really do that? Do I really want to do that? And I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I had this huge epiphany on this trip I took to Chicago. And at the time I was engineering, but I was still working for this import-export company. I knew I wanted to work for myself and be an entrepreneur. I love old cars. I'm really into like muscle cars. And I wanted to get in, like work at a car designer was really part of the reason I went to engineering school. So I found that in Japan, they love our old muscle cars. So I hooked up with this guy in Japan, and we were going to restore cars and send them over to Japan and do this whole business. So I go to Chicago to meet with this guy to see about buying some old cars. So I've never been to Chicago before. I'm from New York, so I know cities. I live in St. Louis, go to Chicago. I get there, and I get in like 11 o'clock at night. I'm hungry. I figure, you know what? I'm just going to go down the street and grab something to eat. So I start walking down the street, and it's like deserted, man. It's like the Twilight Zone. It's like the apocalypse. And Chicago, especially then, it was like a work town. So at 5 o'clock, everybody goes home. So it was dead, and it's cold, man. Like Chicago is the windy city. I'm not like, it's like windy, man. I'm like walking into the wind, trying not to fall over. It's like crazy. So everything's closed. I'm like walking around, and I finally see this one hotel with lights on. And it's this beautiful Art Deco building. So I figured I'll just go in there, warm up, ask somebody. So I go in this hotel, and lights are on, and there's nobody there. It's like, I haven't seen a person. I'm starting to freak out. And it has all this old Salvation Army furniture. And I'm like, what is this place, man? So I finally figure out, I'm walking around, I'm checking it out. And I realized that it used to be this beautiful hotel, but now it's an old age home. So it's converted. And I could just picture like during the day, all the old people like in their walkers and wheelchairs, waiting for someone to come visit, and no one ever comes. And I'm just picturing this. And it's like late at night. It's like midnight now. And I'm just thinking like they're probably all up their rooms with their little IVs and bedpans and, stuck watching Matlock. You always hear this vibe like, oh, you can do what you want. Doesn't matter how old you are. You can always do your dream. But the fact is, there comes a point where you can't. It's like you lived your life, the game's over, you're up in one of those rooms, and you can't do it, man. So there is a time constraint when you can do things. And I pictured myself up in one of those rooms. And when I was walking around, I saw this, I was walking around the place, I saw this big box of records. So, I'm into music, like records, flipping through the records. And I see this one country artist that keeps coming up. And there's this, and I really recognize the guy, but there's one of him with the truck with the big hat. And there's one of him with his guitar and the two girls, and him with the dog, all these albums from like the 50s. And I'm thinking that, all these albums are here because this guy's in one of these rooms now. Like this is his stuff. And this is him when he was younger, but now he's up in one of those rooms. So I just kind of put myself in that place. Like if I was in one of those rooms and what it would be like, you're just like, you lived your life and it's done, and you just have your memories and what you did and your regrets. I thought if I was there right now in one of those rooms and I could go back and be, young again and have a do-over, what would I do? And I figured, what? I got to at least try to do the music thing and my passion, because the worst thing that could happen is you could get to the end of your life and be in that room and like have not even tried. Like if you try and it doesn't work, you tried and, it didn't work. But if you don't even try, man, how can you live with that? It's over and I didn't even make the effort. I could not do. So I realized that, I got to just go for it. And that's when I went from coming out to California and deciding to do that and just deciding that I'm going to do what it takes to make it happen. Because, this is your one shot and you can always go back to working for somebody or doing that. So you got to, for me at least, make that effort. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, because everybody, some people aren't entrepreneurs. Some people just want to work for a company and go home to their family. But for me, that was my journey and what I had to do.
That is so good. That's such a good story, right? And the foresight of a young man to kind of feel that, right? To be in that moment, like that's impactful. I think a lot of people get into that situation at 75 and go,
yeah, too late, man.
I wish I woulda, I coulda, I shoulda. And then we start running that broken record, right? And looping it back. Like if this decision would have been different, and it's living for me, it's living in regret. And
I can't, that's to me, that is like the worst. And, I heard an interesting study. I remember when I was in engineering and I was reading heard something that most people spend more time planning a vacation than they do planning their life. Most people don't, they're just like, I need a job, look in the paper. Okay, take that one. It's like they don't really plan their life. And I went to school in Florida. I got my first job in St. Louis. I was in St. Louis at my desk, 6:30 every morning. I had to be there at 6:30. I remember the first day I thought it was just for like to show up for the orientation, but every morning I had to be in my tie at my desk. And I'm like not a morning person. That was tough. But I designed. Now I'm in California. I live near the beach. I have a recording studio. I tell my kids this. That was by design. That didn't just happen. That was thought out, planned, premeditated. I thought of how I wanted my life to go, and you can't plan everything, but you need a direction, and you got to really think about what direction you want.
Love it. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit to, I love the quote, Chris McChesney, Sean Covey, 4 Disciplines of Execution. Winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win. So let's talk about this time where you're down, where, maybe you're up against it, you're losing, like it's not going the way you want it to, but you found a way to come back and win. Like you're down, but not out. Talk to me about those moments of how you turn that around. What happened? Take us to the moment.
I think it's really about asking yourself the right questions, and that way you'll find solutions. It's like your brain's amazing. Whatever you ask it, you're going to get an answer for. So you have to be super careful what you ask it. Why does this suck? Why am I losing? Why am I not doing well? And I think that's part of when you make the commitment. An example would be, I remember when I came out here doing music, I was getting a few little jobs, but it was financially tough. I wasn't like, I was maybe paying rent, like barely rocking it. And then I read this thing and I had this idea for doing these commercials for car dealerships and trying to syndicate it. And this was in the 80s. This is before internet or any of that stuff. So it was a song that would work for Honda dealers. So I called. There was no way to get the information on all the Honda dealers. You could try to call information 411. So the local Honda National Association happens to be in Torrance. So I called him up and I said, "Hey man, I have this old Honda," which I don't. I have a Camaro, but I had like a '67 Camaro. But I said, and I'm driving cross country and I'm afraid it's going to break down. Could you give me the list of the dealerships? And they're like, "Oh, sure." So they sent me a book with every dealership in the country, phone number, address, like everything. I was like, wow, cool. So I sat there for a whole summer and I produced this jingle that was for Honda dealerships. I thought was really good. And I just called every one of them and I played it over the phone for them. I like plugged my cassette deck into the phone jack and played it for them. And it was really hard. It's like you're getting no, and they're not interested. And I'm like, I gotta play this thing. So I decided, how can I do this and make it fun? Because I'm not digging this and I'm not getting results. So this place had a broken hot tub. So I had the hot tub fixed and I made like a picture of like margarita and I'd sit in the hot tub with the phone and my list of Honda dealerships. And I'm like, started calling people like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And now feeling good. I'm enjoying the process, starting to get some response, making some sales. They're turning me up to their ad agencies. And that turned into like a whole part of my career, working with these car dealerships and ad agencies on licensing songs. I mean, that's become a big part of what I do that helps me when the TV shows and things like that slow down. So I think it's just really asking empowering questions and being committed and trying to be clever. I always picture like the LA freeways just jam with traffic and you don't want to be in that lane with everybody. You don't want to be a sheeple, So always try to figure out what's the off ramp. What's the thing that everybody else is not doing that I could do differently? What's the pivot? How can I stand apart? So, I think those are things you have to ask yourself and work through.
Let's talk about this one. Like you got a very unique ability to take a different lens that other people don't take, right? And maybe it's the creative, maybe it's, I don't know. But what do you think the superpower for you, for Brad, that separates you and catapults you to the 1%?
Hate the crappy ingredients in many beverages and energy drinks? Rebellious Infusions are the go-to functional beverage. They have 5 or fewer plant-based organic ingredients, no sugar, no calories, loaded with antioxidants to boost your immune system, and L-theanine for brain health. Rebellious Infusions are available at drinkrebellious.com. Rethink your drink. For 10% off of your next purchase, use the code 99999. Thank you for listening to the Winners Find a Way show and podcast. Trent, together with the leaders who shared their learning and experiences through this show, are grateful for allowing them to help and support you on your journey to becoming your best. Write a review, rate us 5 stars, and share this episode to your network.